Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Moorhead, Slybird. Good afternoon to my fellow candidates, to the audience, and of course to the St. Croix government retirees. I have always responded when the retirees of St. Croix have called on me, even if I was the only elected official here, and I'm pleased to be here this afternoon. The central issue of this forum is one that is critically important to my running mate Basil Attlee and I. We understand the importance of the issue of saving our retirement system.
When I was growing up, young people were not idle. We went to school, and after school, we were sent to a master to learn a trade. Bad behavior would have a youngster sent to the training school. Today, young people go to school, and after school, if they don't have a job, most don't. They simply are left with idle time. Bad behavior in school today causes expulsion, more idle time. Needless to say, this is a fundamental cause of the social distress our community is experiencing. Do you have any plans for returning some structure to the most vulnerable part of our society, our future, our young?
Well, thank you. And it does begin with education. Our children are so talented, and we cannot afford to lose them. I agree with starting this vocational skills, a broad array of vocational skills, early in the K-12 experience. But there's also an after-school need. There's also an after-school need. And we need to make sure that our community recreational centers are well-equipped and well-staffed. We need to provide the opportunity for our young people to explore their talents and enhance their talents, and do it in a serious way. We need to really invest in our young people's, in sports, in art, in music, and all of the many creative ways that they can express themselves. And then we have to create the kinds of jobs that give them hope for a future, that see the reason for them to stay in school and the relevance of education. And we also need to make that education relevant, because they don't see the relevance. Make that education relevant to the community in which we live, the culture and the issues.
Madam Delegate, the legislature gave the incoming DeYoung administration the authority to issue a $600 million pension obligation bond to stabilize the GERS. The new governor said he was not inclined to shackle our children's future. He said he had other plans for fixing the retirement system. Do you, Madam Delegate, have a plan to fix the growing unfunded liability?
Thank you for that question, because it goes to the central reason why we're here this afternoon. There is nothing more important to this community than resolving the issue of that unfunded liability, because it threatens to bring down the entire economic system of the territory. Hello? Okay. Yes, and I believe that Governor Turnbull, at the end of his administration, had that plan, and we need an infusion of money into that system that is reliable and constant. With that, we can then leverage it to the hundreds of millions of dollars that is required to begin to make sure that our retirees who are waiting to retire can retire, to make sure that those who have retired receive their annuity benefits without any cuts, and then to invest some of that money so that the system can really realize an added return on investment and continue to grow. So I believe that it is important, the first important thing is to provide that revenue source. And we, Basil Otley and I, are committed to making sure that happens, because that is the beginning of floating that bond to make sure that we can begin to make our retirement system whole. But there are also reforms that will have to take place, and we will work with our retirees and our government workers and our unions to find those kinds of reforms that will help to ensure that the retirement system is there for those workers who come behind. But we cannot do it without that infusion of funds. And again, Basil Otley and I are committed to ensuring that there is a steady revenue stream that is identified immediately as we come into office to make sure that we can float the bonds, to provide the funding, to begin to resolve that unfunded liability that now exists in our retirement system.
Try to travel from Frederiksted, St. Croix to Coral Bay, St. John. And I think you begin to comprehend our system of transportation. Whether on island or between islands, transportation is unacceptably inadequate. Do you have any specific plans for public transportation in the Virgin Islands?
A comprehensive transportation plan is critical, and Basil Otley and I will have one. But let me just say that I increased the surface transportation funds coming into this territory from 12 million to 20 million, which is what makes the increase in the Garvey bonds possible. So the territory has benefited by having increased money in the surface transportation fund that I was able to work with the department and the Congress to provide. We expanded the roads that could be fixed with that money. We included subsidies for ferries, never have had it before. And we have encouraged this administration to take advantage of Tiger and other grants in the Department of Transportation, which Basil Otley and I will aggressively pursue. There is funding that we have not taken advantage of, but we can do better, and with our administration we will, beginning with a comprehensive transportation plan that includes buses, ferries, and other entities.
Public school athletes used to compete in an annual inter-island meet on a different island every year. What happened?
Thank you. In addition to the importance in sports in building character and healthy children, the interaction between our children of all of the islands is really important to building that one Virgin Islands that we need to be if we're going to move forward to build a better future for the entire territory. Some of it begins with providing affordable transportation, which goes between the islands, which goes to your previous question. But I have been there with the teams, waiting until the last minute, providing as much funding as we could provide as a delegate, but waiting until that last minute to know if those funds were going to come through. And that is something I do not want to see our children have to go through, to be able to travel to St. Thomas or to travel down island to compete. Because we know that they train hard and they are very competitive, and they need that opportunity. So as Governor and Lieutenant Governor, Basil Otley and I are committed to making sure that that interaction between our students will be possible and paid for.
The Pywanski administration chose to have the Virgin Islands stay outside the U.S. Customs Zone in exchange for duty-free exemptions for tourists returning to the mainland. This created a bonanza for liquor, tobacco, and gift shops in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas in particular. Some say this benefits absentee investors and a small class of our population, but that it increases the cost of living for locals, with customs and postal services in particular severely impacted. Do we need a change?
I think the time has come, with duties being reduced across the world, for us to take a look at coming back inside the customs zone. And we've asked the GAO, the General Accounting Office, to take a look at the pros and cons so that we can make an informed decision. Let me just say that the Lieutenant Governor continues to misrepresent the record. That's over $90 million that we have brought in new road money, not including the over 134 for special projects like that wonderful bypass we have and fixing the Scot-Free Road in St. Thomas. And in addition, as I said before, the amount of Garvey bonds that could be floated was greatly increased by what I was able to do to bring in more road money. And he knows the difference between what the governor can do and the delegate can do, but he continues to try to confuse the public.
Madam Delegate, government retirees have honored their side of the contract. They are entitled to their contractual annuities. What specific plan do you have to guarantee retirees their annuities will be preserved and maintained as contracted?
There is no question that we have, the government of the Virgin Islands has a contractual obligation to meet those annuities. Courts have upheld it, and I believe it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, which will uphold the fact that you cannot cut the annuity of retirees. Whether that happens or not, our administration is committed to setting aside the funding required to ensure that our retirees' annuity continues uninterrupted and uncut. And we can do that in several ways. One, you have the actuary determine what that amount of money is and you secure it. Two, there are programs, there are some insurance products, for example, that can be used to enhance the funding that would be set aside for those retirees. And we plan to explore those and other programs that can help to increase the amount of funding that would be available in what we set aside for those retirees. We're also very concerned about those retirees, those workers who are about to retire, and those who cannot now retire because the funding that the government has owed them has not been spent. And so the infusion of funding that we talk about, finding that steady stream of revenue to put into our retirement system to begin to reduce the unfunded liability, must also go to ensure that those who don't have the flexibility to change their retirement system because they're about to retire can also be secure in their retirement and receive the annuity that they are owed and that they expect. And beyond that, we can look back to the newer employees, and that's where some of the changes would be made. But there's no question that this government owes the people who have worked, who have taken care of me and my family, as I said in my opening statement. We owe you to value the work that you have done for us and to make sure that your retirement is secure and that the annuity that you receive remains as it is supposed to be. And in the meantime, as we fix the economy, that will also help. But there are also other stressors that you're facing. You're facing the higher WAPA bills, you're facing high insurance costs, and the Christensen Otley team is also committed to addressing those other stressors that are making the lives of our retirees and all of the people of the Virgin Islands very difficult.
Matching fund revenues have been as volatile as the stock market on the eve of earnings reports, making it extremely difficult for our local government to forecast budget revenues. In 2006 and 2007, cruise and rum alone was generating an average of $40 million to the general fund. Today, we must make do with the $20 million projected for fiscal year 2015 from cruise and rum and Diageo. What is your current assessment of the Diageo agreement? Matching fund revenues have been as volatile as the stock market on the eve of earnings reports, making it extremely difficult for our local government to forecast budget revenues. In 2006 and 2007, cruise and rum alone was generating an average of $40 million to the general fund. Today, we must make do with the $20 million projected for fiscal year 2015 from cruise and rum and Diageo. What is your current assessment of the Diageo agreement?
I'm just going to say that I am glad that the Lieutenant Governor corrected some of the revenue that was received in the territory, and the increase, of course, is due to the fact that I was able to increase the cover over from 1050 to 1325. I would also want to say that the federal government has covered over into this territory over $260 million just in this year. What has happened is we have borrowed on that money to keep the government afloat, and we have borrowed so much that we have added to the debt of this territory, and all we have left to put into the treasury is $20 million. That borrowing has to stop.
The revised Organic Act of 1954 gave the Virgin Islands a unicameral legislature that was checked and balanced to mimic the federal system, much like our IRB mirrors the IRS. The 7th legislature of the Virgin Islands removed the check and balance from our unicameral legislature. Check and balance is as important to the Republican form of government as the separation of powers. What do you think of the structure of the Virgin Islands legislature today? The revised Organic Act of 1954 gave the Virgin Islands a unicameral legislature that was checked and balanced to mimic the federal system, much like our IRB mirrors the IRS. The 7th legislature of the Virgin Islands removed the check and balance from our unicameral legislature. Check and balance is as important to the Republican form of government as the separation of powers. What do you think of the structure of the Virgin Islands legislature today?
Territory, from education to our legislature, is based on models from the US, some of them many, many years old. It is the position of the Christensen-Attlee administration that the time is now for us to redesign many of those institutions and to reflect the needs, the structure, and the aspirations of the people of the Virgin Islands, and to take those old models and put them where they belong, back in the United States. Let them keep them. We need our own models today, and that is our commitment. We need a constitution to determine what the structure of our government should be. I personally favor a part-time legislature, but it is up to the people of this territory to decide what that structure should be. Again, it's time to move on. It's time to create our own institutions that reflect the needs and the structure of this territory, and to cast off the old models that were forged on us many years ago.
St. Croix is so fertile, it was known as the Garden of the West Indies. We have a captive market in the federally funded school lunch program. Why can't we have an agricultural initiative by beginning to supply the vegetables and beverages for our own school children? Do you see this as a program you can adopt? Delegate, I wonder if you would address the issue of a captive market. Not McDonald's, not anyone else that you'd have to convince. A captive market.
Responding to the same question?
Please.
Absolutely. One of the principles that the Christensen and Otley team believe in is that we must keep and circulate our money here. We're tired supporting everybody else. It's time to support ourselves. We also believe strongly that rebuilding our economy must include strengthening agriculture and aquaculture in our community and providing them with the infrastructure they need to improve their production. And the USDA has a farm-to-school program that we must take advantage of. They have a new coal bank that can help to build that infrastructure that our farmers need. But I think not only to feed our schools, to feed our hospitals, and I think that all of the products that are made in this territory ought to be used in the territory. Our hotels ought to be using the soaps, the crafts. We need to support ourselves and to keep our money circulating here and to support our small businesses, including agriculture and aquaculture.
Madam Delegate, 8 out of 10 Virgin Islands residents are of African descent. The law acknowledges this by requiring the public education system to teach our history and culture from kindergarten to 12th grade. Doesn't the purposeful neglect of the student's identity contribute to psychological aberrations like low self-esteem? What are your thoughts concerning our public schools' neglect of our students being exposed to their rich history and culture like the children of other races?
As the proverb says, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. It's important for us to know our history. And it's important for it to be infused in our children from the earliest ages. There is a cultural education department at the Department of Education, but as far as I know, it is staffed by one individual. We need to make sure that throughout the classroom curriculum, that issues of culture and our history are incorporated, whether it is in math, in reading, or in any of the subjects. As I said earlier, when we talk to students, they do not see the relevance of their education. If we can tie our history into the core of our curriculum, they will begin to be able to understand the rich history from which they come, and yes, it will build their self-esteem. But we have to our money where our mouth is. We cannot have one person, and she's doing a great job, but we cannot just have one person. This is a change in the entire way we teach our students. It is incorporating our African history, our Caribbean, our wider Caribbean history, and of course our Virgin Islands history throughout our curriculum. I don't believe there's even a course in Virgin Islands history in our schools anymore. Not only that, but when our teachers come from wherever they come to work in our schools, they need to be taught Virgin Islands and African history. And they need to know that this must be incorporated into what they teach our children. We do not do that kind of orientation for our teachers. And so if we don't invest in that kind of education for our teachers, it will never reach our students. So it must begin with the teachers. It must be incorporated fully into the curriculum, in addition to even some of the everyday challenges that we face, so that they can see the relevance of the math, of the reading, of the science to our everyday lives. That is what makes education relevant, and the history, yes, it is critical to building the self-esteem of our students and building their self-worth and making them see that they can accomplish anything, that their potential is entirely unlimited. So yes, Mr. Moorhead, it is critical, and we must put our money where our mouth is and make sure that it is incorporated fully into our school system.
The Diageo warehouses located on the West Airport Road at the intersection with the Melvin Evans Highway are emitting a rum fungus. The fungus is creating major environmental and property damage as far west as the state rim. As hazardous as this pollution is, it can be effectively contained within the warehouses themselves. Yet, all authorities avoid the issue as if they don't see it. Do you have anything to say about this serious problem?
Okay. The Christians and Athlete team, of course, believes that everyone must be held accountable, and as a physician, we must protect the health of the people we serve. I have called on EPA to look into this issue and report back to us. We agree, because I drive it every day myself on my way to work, that we see the sign, we see the blackness of the sign and the railing. We know of families that have the black mold on their roofs and on the sides of their homes. And it must be addressed. And I agree, everyone must be held accountable, and the health of our community is paramount. We just got rid of one hazard that has affected the health and the lives of people in the industrial area, and we cannot allow for another hazard to be brought in to affect their lives and their health again. It's okay. The Christians and Athlete team, of course, believes that everyone must be held accountable, and as a physician, we must protect the health of the people we serve. I have called on EPA to look into this issue and report back to us. We agree, because I drive it every day myself on my way to work, that we see the sign, we see the blackness of the sign and the railing. We know of families that have the black mold on their roofs and on the sides of their homes. And it must be addressed. And I agree, everyone must be held accountable, and the health of our community is paramount. We just got rid of one hazard that has affected the health and the lives of people in the industrial area, and we cannot allow for another hazard to be brought in to affect their lives and their health again.
Before the selected service came to St. Croix, one had to travel to Puerto Rico enlist in the military. Today, our territory finds itself among the top per capita and the charts for military service. Yet, veterans still have to suffer the challenges of traveling to Puerto Rico for medical services. Can you explain why our hospitals are unable to provide medical services to our veterans?
I take every opportunity I can to remind my colleagues and the nation of our level of service. We have sent more soldiers per capita from the Virgin Islands and some of the other territories than most states have. Our office has been very aggressive before and since the new exposed issues around veterans care. And we have aggressively moved to make sure that any investigation that's being done goes beyond Puerto Rico and includes the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have also moved aggressively to ensure that the money that was just passed and the President signed will be used here in the Virgin Islands so that our facilities and our providers will be able to provide that service that our veterans need right here at home. And so we have already done what we think is important. What needs to be done now is we need to encourage our physicians to provide that service, as I did when I was practicing medicine.
Thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.